Hello. This weekend I received my pre-ordered new tool Graham Farish N Hall class locomotive. These were announced in September 2025 and had a couple of slips to their expected arrival dates. But a 10-month wait feels very small in comparison to the Dapol Class 56 I received a month ago, 3 years after originally ordering it. The wait for the Dapol GWR Mogul is at 2.5 years and counting. I was very pleased when Graham Farish announced a new GWR steam locomotive, and the Hall class is one of my all-time favourite classes of locomotive. I was a little disappointed they were duplicating a class that Dapol already produces. A GWR King class of modern tooling standards is a glaring gap in the GWR options in the last 20 years, so I'm always hoping one of those will be announced, but there are some issues with Dapol's Hall class. I didn't immediately place an order though, because it wasn't clear what kind of tender the first production run would come with. The original announcement showed a Hawksworth tender, which has a much plainer shape than a collet tender, so I decided to wait until a later production run on the assumption other variations are bound to come out over the next few years. But it was eventually made clear the first production runs would have the collet tender, identical to the one that comes with the Farish Castle class, so I got my order in. After a skim read of the instructions, I concluded I just needed to run the loco in. No need for any extra oiling, and since I'd ordered a sound-fitted model, I didn't need to fit a decoder. Straight out of the box, the model ran perfectly. It was immediately able to crawl slowly and smoothly, including over some points. This is my third new, or as new, Graham Farish steam locomotive, and they've all been this way. It's a joy and relief to get a model that just runs like it should straight away. With that, I set it off in its total of 1 hour running in, 30 minutes forward and 30 minutes backwards. Recently, I discovered Mark III coaches catch on part of the wall inside the tunnel. I haven't sorted that out yet, and I couldn't remember if this was the first time I'd run a tender engine through the tunnel, so I watched it through and it was fine. Another reason I've bought this, even though I've already got a Dapol Hall, is to have sound. However, it seems like the speaker can't go as loud on this model as on others. It sounded like the sounds were distorting at the default volume. I tried using function 27 to trigger the volume to go down, but nothing happened. I've had this issue with other sound-fitted locomotives. I've typically had to program a particular CV directly to set a lower volume. The next day, I put the locomotive onto a programming track to set a new address, speed characteristics, and sound volume. The Zemo manual for the decoder in this loco says that CV266 controls total volume, and is set to a default value of 65. I changed that to 40, which has stopped the distortion, but it's still loud enough. Since I have a Dapol Hall, it was interesting to do a direct comparison. Whilst Halls are one of my favourite locomotives, I'm not one for learning about all of the small detail variations, so although I can see differences between the two, such as cylinder size and angle, steam pipe size and cab height, I don't know if those are just variations that existed in real life. The Dapol is a 4900 class collet hall, whereas the Graham Farish is a 6959 class Hawksworth Modified Hall. I'm rarely able to get a good colour representation in my photos or video footage in the railway room. What I see myself in the room is not what I see in the resulting footage, but in this case it does show the definite difference in the Dapol and Graham Farish representations of GWR green. Personally, I don't think either look right. Here's a photo from Wikimedia Commons of 6960 at Minehead in GWR green. It looks brighter than Graham Farish's representation. I think Dapol's is closer, but doesn't look as rich as the real thing. Often, Dapol's GWR locos look a bit washed out, but getting colour right in a different scale and when people have them in all sorts of different environments is very difficult. I've been through my photos and looked for engines in GWR livery at Heritage Railways, and found a few. Note that in spite of both very frequently being called Brunswick green, the British Railways green wasn't the same as the GWR green, so I haven't compared the locos to photos I've got of BR liveried engines. Personally, I prefer the GWRs. It's richer and brighter, whereas the BR green has more of an olive shade to it. Ultimately, I think the liveries on both model representations still look nice. I'm afraid their colours don't come across in my photos or video footage though. In terms of overall detailing, I think the Dapol and Farish are similar, even though the Dapol is a lot older. They've both got a nice level of fine detailing, including in the cab. I didn't look closely, but there's potentially more in-cab detail in the Farish Hall. Cab controls aren't very noticeable with a big tender in the way, but every so often you catch sight of them, so they're definitely worth having. Much more so than cab details in a diesel, I think. There are, though, some glaring faults with the Dapol halls, which I've pointed out in previous videos. They've got a warped frame that curves upwards at the buffers, their motion guides from the cylinders aren't horizontal, and, of course, they've got that big fat drive shaft from tender to firebox. None of these are issues with the Graham Farish Hall. Once the hall had completed its running in, I wanted it to pull a rake of GWR coaches, and wanted to use my Dapol pannier tank to fetch them for it. It's been a while since my pannier has done much running, and it was quite groggy, so unfortunately the big hand from the sky had to intervene a lot. I don't recall seeing engines running tender first in photos I've seen of the Great Western. That just seems to be a Heritage Railway thing. So later I removed the front repeater coupler and tried to fit detailing parts instead. The plate that goes across the front of the bogie just didn't seem to want to sit in place, and wherever I tried to fit it on it just looked a bit silly, so in the end, after lots of trying, I gave up with that. I did fit the hook and mock chain though, which are just one piece of moulded plastic, and proportionally have a fair bit of flashing on them, but it's not too visible under normal viewing. Speaking of couplers, the rear one is reluctant to fall back down after being pushed up, so needs a bit of assistance to couple up to rolling stock. Once coupled, it does at least stay coupled. So far, I'm very pleased with the new hall. Very minor coupling issue aside, mechanically this model seems flawless and it has the great visual finish that's normal nowadays. There have been quite a few diesel bargains around lately that I've been tempted by, such as other liveries of class 47, 56, 59 or 66. But I haven't bought any of them because it seems like we don't get new steam locomotives very often compared with diesels. I've decided that from now on my money is going to be mainly focused on steam rather than diesel. I've always preferred steam, but if I keep buying diesels then that tells the manufacturers to keep making them, and they're probably a lot easier to make. Here's hoping for more GWR steam engines from Graham Farish. If they're going to keep up with their current visual and mechanical standards, they'll be a joy to have. That's all for now. Bye bye.